On a fateful New York morning, a 13-year-old hero's selfless act saved a pregnant woman. But beneath that miraculous rescue, a dark conspiracy was already in motion, threatening to shatter lives and redefine destiny. Are you ready to uncover the truth? The morning broke over New York City like the opening chords of a haunting symphony, each note laden with an unspoken promise and a whisper of impending change. In the delicate glow of dawn, when the skyline was softened by a wash of gold and the streets lay quiet and expectant, Evelyn Carter emerged into a world that seemed to be holding its breath. At 32, pregnant with her first child, she embodied both fragility and fierce hope. Clad in a flowing light coat that caught the early breeze and a scarf that danced around her shoulders, she stepped onto the familiar pavements of the Upper East Side with a quiet determination. Today, the city felt different, not merely a place of routine and orderly progression, but a realm where destiny might suddenly assert itself in ways unimaginable. Evelyn's every step resonated with an inner rhythm, a beat that pulsed with dreams of the future, even as shadows of past disappointments lingered in the recesses of her mind. The world around her was bathed in an almost surreal clarity. The majestic buildings, the glimmer of windows catching the first rays of sunlight, and the gentle hum of early commuters all contributed to an atmosphere that was as calm as it was charged with unspoken possibilities. It was as if the entire city was aware that this was no ordinary day. Beneath that placid surface, however, fate was already orchestrating events that would soon collide in a moment of raw, unpredictable drama. As Evelyn walked, her thoughts drifted to the new life growing inside her, a symbol of hope amid the complexities of her own existence. She had long believed in the possibility of renewal, in the promise that every new beginning carried with it the potential to heal old wounds. Yet in that fleeting morning, the world seemed poised on a knife's edge, ready to reveal a truth that would shatter her illusions and force her to confront the unpredictable nature of destiny. Unbeknownst to her, the delicate balance between hope and despair was about to be violently disrupted. At the precise moment when the city appeared to be holding its breath, a sound, a harsh, jarring note that cut through the quiet, shattered the serene morning. The blare of a car horn erupted unexpectedly, echoing off the tall buildings and reverberating in the depths of Evelyn's soul. In an instant, the gentle cadence of the day was supplanted by an urgent, chaotic rhythm. In the midst of this auditory assault, a massive truck appeared, its engine roaring like a beast awakened from slumber. The vehicle barreled down the street with a relentless speed that seemed to mock the very idea of safety. Time itself appeared to slow, every second stretching into an eternity as the impending threat loomed closer. In that fraught instant, Evelyn's senses were overwhelmed by a maelstrom of emotions: fear, disbelief, and a sudden, desperate need to survive. Her eyes, wide with terror, scanned the scene as if trying to grasp the surreal reality unfolding before her. It was then that fate revealed one of its most astonishing acts. From the chaotic crowd emerged a slight figure, barely more than a boy, whose presence would alter the course of the day and, indeed, the lives intertwined within it. Malik Johnson, a 13-year-old with eyes that reflected a depth of experience far beyond his years, moved with a speed and purpose that belied his tender age. In an act that seemed to suspend the natural order of things, he darted into the path of the oncoming truck. The world around him blurred into a maelstrom of colors and sounds, but his resolve was unyielding. With a courage that defied both his physical stature and the prejudices that so often sought to diminish him, Malik lunged forward, his entire being focused on one singular goal: to protect a life that was about to be irrevocably changed. In that heart-stopping moment, as the truck's horn blared and its tires screeched against the pavement, Malik collided with the force of destiny itself. The impact was sudden and jarring. a collision of youth and mettle, of bravery and the cold mechanics of fate. Evelyn, caught in the crossfire of that fateful intervention, was thrown into a whirlwind of shock and disorientation. The concrete below seemed to rise up to meet her as the world tilted precariously. Amidst the chaos, the truck swerved, its path diverted by the unforeseen intervention of a young hero. For a heartbeat, the cacophony of terror and uncertainty gave way to an eerie silence, as if the universe had paused to acknowledge the magnitude of what had just transpired. In the stillness that followed, Evelyn found herself cradled by a mixture of pain and profound gratitude. The realization that she had been saved, a miracle born of instinct and courage, washed over her in a tide of emotion that left her breathless. Her trembling lips managed a soft, barely audible thank you, a word that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. Yet the victory of survival was tempered by the bitter taste of societal cruelty. As onlookers began to murmur and murk, a chorus of voices filled the air with a vitriolic undercurrent. Instead of being lauded for his valor, Malik's selfless act was met with sneers and derisive comments, a reflection of a deep-seated prejudice that marred even the most heroic moments. In that instant, the truth of a divided society was laid bare, an unyielding reminder that even acts of unadulterated bravery could be tainted by the poison of discrimination. For Malik, the world had just shifted in an unforeseen way. His heroic deed, performed with the pure intent of saving a life, was met not with the applause it deserved, but with contempt born of prejudice. His eyes, which had shone with determination in the moment of crisis, now flickered with the pain of rejection and the bitter sting of unacknowledged sacrifice. In that turbulent instant, the fragile line between heroism and victimhood blurred, leaving in its wake a profound question. Why must the light of courage always be dimmed by the shadows of societal bias? As the emergency vehicles finally converged on the scene and the clamor of rescue efforts filled the air, Evelyn's mind reeled with conflicting thoughts. Amid the haze of shock and relief, she struggled to comprehend the surreal sequence of events. The stark juxtaposition of life and death, heroism and derision, hope and despair, played out in a tableau that was as heartbreaking as it was awe-inspiring. Evelyn's gaze searched desperately for Malik in the dispersing crowd, hoping to catch a glimpse of the boy whose valor had defied the ordinary. But he had already melted away into the urban tapestry, leaving behind only the echo of his unyielding spirit. In that instant of raw, unfiltered emotion, New York City itself seemed to transform. The cityscape, with its towering edifices and ceaseless flow of life, had borne witness to a moment that was both extraordinary and tragic, a moment that encapsulated the fragile beauty of human existence. The air was thick with the residue of tension, the metallic scent of adrenaline mingling with the distant aroma of morning coffee and the quiet murmur of those who had been spectators to a miracle. It was as if the city, in its vast and indifferent complexity, had paused to acknowledge that something profound had occurred, a fleeting yet eternal imprint on the fabric of time. For Evelyn, that day would forever be etched in her memory as a turning point, a moment when fate, in its enigmatic cruelty and unexpected grace, intervened to alter the course of her life. The act of being saved, so sudden and jarring, carried with it the promise of transformation. It was a reminder that even in the midst of chaos and cruelty, there could exist sparks of light powerful enough to ignite change. Yet, as she stood there, still reeling from the shock and overwhelmed by the surge of gratitude and sorrow, Evelyn could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, a prelude to a deeper, more tumultuous journey that lay ahead. In the hours that followed, as the city slowly resumed its frenetic pace, Evelyn found herself trapped in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The morning's events had shattered the illusion of safety and predictability that had long cocooned her world. Now, every sound, every shadow seemed to carry a hint of foreboding, as if the universe had conspired to rewrite the rules of her existence. In the quiet solitude of her apartment, with the distant hum of New York's restless streets as a backdrop, she sat by a window and let the events of the morning wash over her. Each recollection was a vivid, visceral reminder of the fragility of life and the inexplicable ways in which destiny operated. Her mind wandered back to the sound of that blaring horn, to the screeching of the truck's tires, and to the blurred, chaotic figures that had filled the scene. She replayed the image of Malik, a determined, defiant presence against a backdrop of fear and derision, and wondered at the inexplicable force that had propelled him to risk everything. How could a boy, so young and unassuming, harbor within him the kind of courage that could defy fate itself? The question swirled in her thoughts, mingling with the residual adrenaline that still pulsed through her veins. They were questions that demanded answers, answers that would come only with time, and perhaps with pain. As the day unfolded, Evelyn's experience became a prism through which she began to see the world in sharper, more contrasting hues. The incident had revealed not only the capacity for heroism that lay dormant in the heart of a young boy, but also the pervasive cruelty of a society too quick to judge and condemn. In the quiet moments of reflection that followed, she found herself questioning the very nature of gratitude and justice. How could a moment of life-saving courage be tainted by the venom of bigotry? And what did it say about a world where even the purest acts of bravery were marred by a prejudice that was as old as time? This relentless introspection slowly gave way to a burgeoning resolve. Evelyn realized that the events of that morning were not random, not merely a twist of fate. They were a call to action, a summons to confront the deep-seated inequalities that had long festered in the shadows of society. The shock of nearly losing her life was transformed into a fierce determination to protect not only her own future, but also the future of those whose voices had been silenced by injustice. In the quiet of that solitary morning, amid the residual echoes of chaos and the dawning light of a new day, she vowed silently that she would honor the sacrifice of the brave boy by ensuring that his act of heroism would not be forgotten, and that the wounds inflicted by cruelty would one day heal through the balm of justice. The city, in its endless cacophony and vibrant pulse, carried on unaware of the profound shift that had taken place in one woman's heart. Yet for Evelyn, every passing moment became charged with meaning. Every whisper of the wind, every flicker of light on the glass of towering skyscrapers seemed to speak of a destiny unfolding, a destiny that was as unpredictable as it was undeniable. In that moment, New York City was not merely a backdrop to her life. It was an active participant in a narrative that was being written with the ink of courage, sacrifice, and redemption. And so, as the day progressed and the shock of that fateful encounter slowly gave way to the steady march of time, Evelyn stepped forward into an uncertain future with a heart full of questions and a soul ignited by the promise of change. The morning's events had been a violent interruption, a moment when fate had thrust her into a vortex of emotions and revelations. In that crucible of experience, she discovered not only the fragility of human existence, but also the extraordinary resilience that lay within her. The city around her, its relentless energy, its boundless potential, mirrored the tumult inside her, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected twists of fate could be the very catalyst for a new beginning. In the lingering afterglow of that life-altering morning, as Evelyn gazed out over the awakening city, she felt an irresistible pull toward a future shrouded in mystery and promise. The unanswered questions, the lingering pain of discrimination, and the bittersweet gratitude for the life that had been spared melded into a single, profound realization that sometimes the most profound moments of our existence arrive when we least expect them, altering the trajectory of our lives in ways that are both heartbreaking and transformative. And in that realization, there was a spark, a quiet, steadfast flame that whispered of hope, of a revolution of the spirit that could one day heal the deep scars of injustice. Thus, on that unforgettable day, when fate intervened with both cruel indifference and miraculous grace, Evelyn Carter's life was set irrevocably on a new course. A course that would take her into the heart of a struggle far larger than herself, into a battle against the forces that sought to diminish the brilliance of human courage. It was a beginning laden with both promise and peril, a prologue to a story that would demand everything of those who dared to challenge the darkness. And as the city's first rays of afternoon sun broke through the lingering mists of dawn, Evelyn stepped boldly into that uncertain future, her heart a battleground of fear and hope, her spirit poised to transform tragedy into the seeds of a revolution that would echo through every corner of a fractured yet resilient world. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful morning, New York City began to reveal a different side of itself, a side where hope and resilience intertwined in unexpected ways. Evelyn Carter, still trembling from the shock of her near-death experience, carried with her a profound sense of gratitude that bordered on the sacred. The image of Malik Johnson, that brave 13-year-old who had risked everything without a hint of hesitation, was burned into her memory. His act had not only saved her life, but had stirred something deep within her, a desire to honor such courage and, in doing so, to stand against the prevailing currents of injustice that so often went unquestioned. Determined to express her thanks beyond a simple word, Evelyn resolved to invite Malik to share a meal, a gesture that was meant to be both an act of gratitude and the opening of a dialogue that could transcend the barriers of age, class, and prejudice. That evening, in a modest yet warmly lit restaurant tucked away in Midtown, their worlds converged over a table set for an honest conversation. The restaurant, with its understated elegance and gentle murmur of conversations, became a haven from the cacophony of a city still reeling from the earlier events. It was here that Evelyn, with a tenderness in her eyes that belied her inner strength, sought to reach out to Malik, hoping that their encounter would forge a connection strong enough to challenge the harsh realities outside. As they sat down, the atmosphere was imbued with an air of intimacy, a shared understanding that what they were about to discuss went far beyond ordinary gratitude. Evelyn's voice, soft yet resolute, broke the initial silence. She expressed her heartfelt thanks for the courage Malik had shown, emphasizing that his selfless act had not only saved her, but had also ignited a spark of hope within her soul. Malik, whose quiet demeanor had concealed an inner fire all along, listened intently, his eyes reflecting both youthful wonder and an unexpected burden of experience, revealed the complex tapestry of emotions that lay beneath the surface. In his measured tone, he acknowledged that his actions had been instinctual, the natural response of someone who had grown up witnessing the struggles of his community, struggles that were often compounded by the sting of discrimination and neglect. The conversation soon took on a deeper tone, as both began to share fragments of their personal realities. Malik spoke of life in his modest Brooklyn neighborhood, a world where the challenges of economic hardship and societal indifference were woven into the fabric of daily existence. He described his family with a quiet dignity, his mother, who juggled multiple jobs to keep the household afloat, and his father, whose work as a driver had long been a symbol of the invisible labor that sustained their lives. Yet amidst these narratives of perseverance, Malik's words carried the weight of deep-seated injustice, a story of dreams deferred and potential overlooked by a society too quick to judge by appearances. Evelyn, in turn, revealed her own inner conflicts. Despite the comforts that had defined her life, she was painfully aware of the subtle yet persistent prejudices that lurked even in her own privileged circles. The encounter earlier that day had shattered the illusion that kindness was universally recognized and celebrated. Instead, she had witnessed the sour taste of bigotry, a reminder that even acts of genuine bravery were vulnerable to misinterpretation and disdain. With a measured sadness in her voice, she confessed that while her heart overflowed with gratitude for Malik's intervention, it also ached at the thought of the unjust labels that society so readily affixed to him. There was a bitter irony in the fact that such an act of heroism, so pure and uncalculated, was marred by the cruelty of narrow-mindedness. As the meal progressed, the conversation shifted from personal reflections to the broader issues that affected their communities. Evelyn's expression darkened as she broached a subject that had been weighing heavily on her conscience. She disclosed, with a tremor of both fear and defiance, that her husband, Harrison Langford, was the driving force behind a redevelopment project that threatened to upend the lives of countless families. Families like Malik's, whose neighborhoods were slowly being consumed by a tide of modernity that cared little for history or humanity. Harrison, a man whose outward charm masked a complex inner world, had championed this project under the guise of progress. Yet Evelyn had come to see it as a cold, calculated maneuver that prioritized profit over people, a betrayal that not only undermined the cultural fabric of their city, but also devalued the lives of those who had long been marginalized. The revelation hung in the air, heavy with implication. Malik's face tightened as he absorbed the news, his youthful eyes hardening with a resolve that spoke of shared pain and a deep-seated desire for justice. It was a moment of profound convergence, the realization that their paths were inextricably linked not just by a single act of heroism, but by the continuing struggle against forces that sought to diminish the value of human life. In that quiet restaurant, over the soft clink of cutlery and the gentle murmur of background conversations, a new alliance began to take shape. It was an alliance born out of mutual respect and an unwavering commitment to protect the dignity of the overlooked. In the hours that followed, as the shadows lengthened and the city outside grew darker, Evelyn and Malik found themselves drafting tentative plans that hinted at a rebellion against the prevailing order. They spoke of strategies to mobilize community support, of using the power of collective action to confront the injustices that had long been tolerated. Evelyn, whose heart had been open to the raw realities of life beyond her sheltered existence, envisioned a future where the redevelopment project could be halted, not through bitter confrontation alone, but by a reawakening of empathy and solidarity. Malik, with the quiet wisdom of one who had already experienced both the cruelty of prejudice and the power of resilience, expressed a simple yet profound wish that his family, and the many families like theirs, be treated with the respect and fairness they deserved. The discussion was as much a revelation as it was a promise that the events of that day would not be confined to a single, fleeting moment of crisis, but would instead serve as a catalyst for a deeper, more enduring change. Their words flowed with an intensity that belied the calm setting. Every sentence was laden with the weight of personal histories and the unspoken hope for a better future. The restaurant, with its soft lighting and quiet elegance, became a microcosm of the larger world they hoped to transform, a world where the old order of indifference and exploitation could be challenged by the fierce, unyielding power of human connection. In that transformative evening, secrets were shared not as burdens, but as the building blocks of a new alliance. Evelyn disclosed documents and information she had gathered on the redevelopment project, a tapestry of figures and contracts that revealed a stark reality. Behind the glossy promises of progress lay a ruthless exploitation of communities that had no voice. Her confession was not merely an act of transparency, but a clarion call to action, urging Malik and everyone who had been touched by similar struggles to stand up and claim their rightful place in the narrative of the city. Malik listened intently, his expression a mix of sorrow and fierce determination. The gravity of what he was hearing, the intertwining of personal betrayal and systemic injustice, ignited a fire within him that had been dormant for far too long. As the evening wore on and the meal came to its quiet end, an unspoken understanding settled between them. They recognized that the bond they had forged in that brief, intense encounter was not one of convenience, but of necessity. It was a bond that transcended the conventional boundaries of age and circumstance, uniting two souls committed to challenging a world that had long overlooked the quiet struggles of the vulnerable. In that shared silence, punctuated only by the occasional murmur of conversation from nearby tables, they vowed to work together to dismantle the systems of oppression that had marred their lives. Evelyn pledged to leverage her position and influence to confront the redevelopment project, while Malik promised to be the voice of his community, a beacon of hope in the face of pervasive neglect. In the days that followed that pivotal evening, the alliance between Evelyn and Malik began to take on tangible form. They met frequently in discreet corners of the city, quiet cafes, small community centers, even the back room of a modest library, to map out a strategy that would expose the corruption at the heart of the redevelopment plan. Their meetings were filled with passionate debates and the careful examination of documents, plans, and testimonies that had been gathered from countless voices in the community. Each conversation was a step toward building a movement that aimed not only to halt the immediate threat, but to create a lasting framework for justice and accountability. During these sessions, the stark disparities between the worlds they each inhabited became even more apparent. Evelyn, with her access to resources and networks of influence, brought a level of organization and strategic thinking that had heretofore been reserved for boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. Malik, on the other hand, provided a perspective grounded in the raw, unfiltered reality of life on the margins, a perspective that was both a sobering reminder of the cost of injustice and an inspiration for transformative change. Their partnership was not without its challenges. There were moments when the weight of their collective burdens threatened to overwhelm them, moments when the complexity of the problems they faced seemed insurmountable. Yet in those moments, the memory of that single, heroic act, the day when fate had intervened, served as a powerful reminder of what was at stake. It was in the quiet resilience of their shared purpose that they began to see a glimmer of hope. Evelyn initiated contact with community leaders, activists, and even sympathetic insiders within her own circles, slowly building a coalition dedicated to preserving the integrity of neighborhoods that had long been marginalized. Malik, emboldened by the trust placed in him by his community, became a tireless advocate for change. He spoke at local gatherings, his voice resonating with a mix of youthful determination and a wisdom born of hardship, urging those who had been silenced to reclaim their narratives. His speeches, filled with the raw honesty of lived experience, ignited sparks of resistance and hope in the hearts of those who listened. As the coalition grew, so did the sense of urgency. Evelyn and Malik, now bound by a mutual commitment to a cause larger than themselves, orchestrated meetings and rallies that challenged the status quo. Every new piece of evidence they uncovered about the redevelopment project was a clarion call to the community, a call to resist a future where human lives were mere collateral in the pursuit of profit. With each passing day, the alliance became more than a secret pact. It evolved into a beacon for change, a rallying cry for justice that reverberated through the streets of New York. In the quiet afterglow of those intense evenings, as the city prepared to sleep beneath a blanket of stars, the seeds of transformation had been firmly sown. Evelyn's gratitude for Malik's life-saving act had blossomed into a fierce resolve to protect the vulnerable and to confront the systemic forces that threatened to erase the rich tapestry of human experience. Malik, in turn, emerged as a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, a single courageous act could spark a revolution of the heart and mind. By the time the night yielded to the first light of dawn, a new alliance had taken shape. One that was built on a foundation of shared secrets, unyielding determination, and the belief that justice was not an abstract ideal, but a tangible goal that could be achieved when hearts and minds united. In that intimate communion of purpose, Evelyn and Malik discovered not only the strength to challenge an oppressive system, but also the profound beauty of a friendship forged in the crucible of adversity. A friendship that promised to light the way toward a future where every voice mattered and every life was cherished. Thus, the events of that transformative evening became a turning point, a moment when gratitude and determination converged to defy the bitter forces of injustice. The alliance they formed was a promise to themselves and to every soul who had ever been silenced that they would stand together, that their combined courage would be a shield against the tides of oppression, and that the memory of one heroic act could indeed change the course of destiny. And as New York City continued its ceaseless pulse into the night, the promise of that secret alliance resonated through its streets, a quiet yet unyielding hymn of hope and redemption that would not be easily forgotten. In the weeks following that pivotal evening, New York City began to reveal a darker underbelly, a hidden world of deals made behind closed doors and promises shattered in the glare of greed. Evelyn Carter, fueled by a steadfast resolve, set her sights on halting a redevelopment project that was set to uproot entire communities. This project, championed by her husband Harrison Langford, now loomed as a symbol of corporate indifference and ruthless ambition. Yet Evelyn's compassion had transformed into fierce determination. She gathered every scrap of evidence she could find: confidential memos, skewed financial reports, and testimonies from residents whose lives were already in jeopardy. With each new document, the true face of the project emerged, a facade of progress concealing a calculated plan to sacrifice the vulnerable for profit. Malik Johnson, whose spirit had grown stronger with every challenge, became the eyes and ears on the ground. In the labyrinthine neighborhoods of Brooklyn, he moved quietly from one community meeting to another, listening to stories of displacement and injustice. Malik discovered that families, many of whom had lived in these tight-knit enclaves for generations, were being told that modernity was a blessing, while their homes were being quietly sold off to greedy investors. His heart ached as he listened to the elders speak of memories tied to old brick buildings and tree-lined streets, memories that were at risk of being erased. The injustice he witnessed further ignited the fire within him, fueling his determination to be not only a witness but a warrior against the exploitation of his community. As Evelyn delved deeper into the bureaucratic web spun around the redevelopment plan, she realized that the corruption extended far beyond a simple business deal. Harrison Langford, once a symbol of affluence and modernity, was entangled in a series of backroom deals and manipulations that exploited racial and economic divides. Evelyn's discoveries painted a picture of deliberate exploitation: contracts with loopholes designed to evict longtime residents, secret incentives for developers, and the systematic undermining of community voices. This revelation not only pained her, but also ignited an inner rebellion, a need to restore justice and balance where power had long been abused. Late one night in the quiet solitude of her study, Evelyn sat poring over stacks of files and reports. The room was dimly lit by a solitary lamp, its soft glow illuminating pages filled with damning evidence. Each document was a testament to a reality that Harrison and his allies had tried desperately to obscure. Evelyn felt a profound mix of betrayal and resolve. She had once believed in a future where wealth and compassion could coexist harmoniously, but now she faced the stark truth that power often thrives on the suffering of the powerless. Determined to rewrite this narrative, she knew that the only way forward was to expose the insidious forces at play and reclaim the dignity of the communities under threat. The next day, Evelyn took a decisive step. She called together a meeting of community leaders, activists, and sympathetic insiders who shared her vision for a fairer city. In a modest community center in Harlem, under a ceiling marked by years of struggle and hope, voices rose in a chorus of defiance. Among them were longtime residents, local artists, and educators, each with a story of loss and resilience. Evelyn presented the evidence she had gathered, detailing how the redevelopment project was less about urban renewal and more about profit extraction at the expense of tradition and humanity. Her words were precise and powerful, stirring a mix of anger and resolve in the room. The audience, diverse yet united by their shared fate, vowed to take a stand against the impending injustice. Meanwhile, Malik worked tirelessly to gather more testimonials from his neighbors. He visited small apartments and community halls, recording stories that captured the heartache of displacement and the fierce love for a place called home. In his conversations, he encountered not just tales of sorrow, but also expressions of undying hope and determination. Families spoke of their dreams to remain in the neighborhoods where every corner held memories of the past, where every street echoed with the legacy of those who had come before. Malik's role quickly evolved from that of a rescuer to that of a storyteller, a voice that would amplify the struggles of his people and serve as a beacon for change. As the movement grew, so did the pressure on Harrison Langford. In the polished boardrooms of Manhattan's financial district, whispers of dissent began to circulate. Harrison found himself caught between two worlds, the glittering promise of modernity and the harsh reality of a community fighting for survival. His once unassailable confidence now wavered in the face of mounting evidence and a growing coalition determined to dismantle the exploitative system he represented. In private meetings, his advisors urged him to maintain the facade of progress, to spin the narrative in his favor. But the cracks were beginning to show, and the truth that Evelyn and Malik had unearthed could no longer be hidden under layers of corporate rhetoric. With the combined forces of grassroots activism and emerging media interest, the tide began to turn. Evelyn, with her deep well of compassion and unyielding resolve, and Malik, with his steadfast commitment to his community, orchestrated a series of public demonstrations. In front of City Hall and in the shadow of towering skyscrapers, residents and activists rallied together, their voices, at once trembling with emotion and resolute with determination, demanded that the redevelopment project be scrapped and that the rights of the displaced be recognized. The protests were peaceful yet powerful, a living testament to the strength of a united community. Throughout these turbulent days, Evelyn and Malik forged an alliance that transcended personal differences and united them under the banner of justice. In clandestine meetings held in quiet cafes and behind the closed doors of community centers, they mapped out their strategy to expose the corruption that had plagued the project. Their plans were meticulous and daring, designed not only to halt the imminent threat, but also to ensure that the voices of the marginalized would be heard in every corridor of power. They knew that the battle ahead was fraught with challenges, legal battles, public opinion wars, and the constant threat of reprisal, but their shared vision of a just and compassionate city sustained them. In one particularly charged evening, as autumn winds swept through the city's bustling streets, Evelyn addressed a gathering of local residents at a community hall in Brooklyn. Her speech, delivered with both passion and calm clarity, spoke to the heart of every listener. She recounted the evidence of exploitation, the relentless drive of greed that had overshadowed the value of human life, and the urgent need to reclaim the neighborhoods that had long been the bedrock of the community's identity. Her words resonated deeply, stirring emotions that ranged from anger to profound hope. The gathering left that night not merely as spectators, but as active participants in a movement that promised to redefine the future of their city. Malik, standing on the sidelines of these public rallies, felt a transformation within himself. No longer was he just the brave boy who had once risked his life to save a stranger. He had become a symbol of resistance, a living embodiment of the idea that even the smallest voice could challenge the greatest injustice. His eyes, now alight with a fierce determination, met those of his neighbors as they marched together, a unified front against the encroaching tide of corruption. In that moment, compassion had met corruption head-on, and the resulting clash had set in motion a chain of events that would reshape their world. In the quiet interludes between protests and clandestine meetings, Evelyn and Malik often found solace in their shared conviction that justice was not a distant ideal, but a reality waiting to be claimed. Their alliance was built on a foundation of deep mutual respect, a recognition that every act of kindness and every gesture of defiance had the power to turn the tide against an entrenched system of exploitation. The movement they had helped ignite was more than a protest against a redevelopment project. It was a declaration that compassion could and must triumph over corruption. As the struggle intensified, the city itself seemed to hold its breath, watching as the battle for its soul unfolded in real time. The polished facades of corporate towers now stood as stark reminders of the disparities between wealth and poverty, progress and preservation. In every street corner, in every whispered conversation among neighbors, there was a growing awareness that the fight for justice was not just about stopping a project, it was about redefining the very values that underpin their society. And in that collective awakening, the tide of change began to rise. In the days that followed the impassioned protests and secret meetings, a darker undercurrent began to emerge, a shadowy labyrinth of lies and manipulation that threatened to undo the hard-won progress of Evelyn Carter and Malik Johnson's alliance. As autumn deepened over New York City, the once vibrant tapestry of hope was infiltrated by a creeping sense of betrayal and deceit that hinted at forces far more insidious than simple corporate greed. Evelyn found herself alone one late evening in her study, poring over a maze of documents and confidential memos that painted an increasingly damning picture of the redevelopment project. The soft glow of her desk lamp illuminated pages of financial irregularities, offshore accounts, and coded communications that revealed a deliberate orchestration of injustice. Each piece of evidence was like a dark thread woven into a web spun not only by Harrison Langford and his corporate cronies, but also by unknown actors whose names were whispered only in the corridors of power. The realization hit her with a profound mix of sorrow and determination. It was not enough to stop a misguided project. She had to expose the entire network of corruption that had been meticulously built to exploit vulnerable communities. Driven by a desire to reclaim justice, Evelyn began to connect the dots, linking shady transactions to influential figures who had long operated behind the facade of respectability. Her heart pounded with the weight of responsibility as she discovered that the exploitation extended far beyond financial gain. It was a system designed to silence dissent and perpetuate inequality. Each new revelation deepened her resolve. The very fabric of her city was being torn apart by greed, and it was up to her and her newfound allies to mend it. Malik, too, had become a relentless seeker of truth. With a maturity that belied his young age, he ventured into the heart of his community, listening intently to the whispered stories of his neighbors. In the crowded hallways of Brooklyn apartment buildings and the modest living rooms of longtime residents, he collected accounts of intimidation and coercion, stories of individuals threatened by men in dark suits, of families who had been forced to abandon homes steeped in decades of history, and of community members too frightened to speak openly. These personal testimonies were the raw, human side of the web of deceit that Evelyn was unraveling. For Malik, every narrative was a call to arms, a reminder that behind every manipulated ledger lay a life upended and a future compromised. The deeper they dug, the more perilous the stakes became. Evelyn discovered that Harrison Langford's involvement was far more complex than a mere clash between progress and preservation. His role was entangled with a network of powerful investors and political figures who had ensured that every legal loophole was exploited, every regulation bent to their will. The redevelopment project, once promoted as a visionary plan for urban renewal, was in fact a calculated strategy to reshape neighborhoods for maximum profit, one that would dispossess generations of families and erase the cultural legacy of communities like Malik's. Evelyn's findings were explosive. They implicated not only high-ranking executives and city officials, but also revealed covert arrangements that offered immunity and lavish incentives to those complicit in the scheme. The magnitude of the deceit was staggering, and it quickly became clear that the true enemy was not a single individual, but an entire system built on exploitation and manipulation. Haunted by the enormity of what she had uncovered, Evelyn reached out to Maria Sanchez, a fearless investigative journalist renowned for her commitment to uncovering the truth. Together, they began to compile a comprehensive dossier, a meticulous chronicle of every underhanded deal, every bribery scandal, and every instance of systemic abuse tied to the redevelopment project. Their work took them to abandoned warehouses, hidden offices, and confidential meetings where hushed voices discussed millions of dollars and lives in the balance. Every interview, every document added another layer to the vast and convoluted web of deceit. Evelyn's apartment transformed into a war room, its walls adorned with charts, timelines, and photographs that mapped out the intricate network of corruption. The more they uncovered, the more the magnitude of the betrayal loomed large over the city, threatening to cast an even darker shadow over the future of its most vulnerable citizens. As the investigation advanced, whispers of threats began to circulate. Anonymous messages arrived at Evelyn's door, warning her to cease her inquiries. In the dim light of a cold winter night, she felt the chilling presence of those determined to keep their secrets hidden. Yet far from deterring her, these warnings only steeled her resolve. The danger was real, but so was the necessity of exposing the truth. For every threat, she countered with evidence. For every attempt at intimidation, Malik and the community responded with unwavering defiance. The courage of the people was palpable, a shared understanding that silence in the face of corruption was a surrender of their dignity and heritage. In a climactic meeting held in a discreet location away from prying eyes, Evelyn and Malik brought together their most trusted allies, community leaders, activists, and a few insiders who had grown disillusioned with the rampant corruption. In that cramped, dimly lit room, the air was thick with a sense of urgency. Each participant shared their story, their personal battles against a system that had long ignored their pleas. It was a moment of profound solidarity, where every revelation added a new thread to the collective tapestry of resistance. The meeting was not just an exchange of information, it was a vow to pull back the veil of deceit, to shine a light on every hidden transaction and every underhanded decision that had imperiled their community. Amid the tense discussions and emotional testimonies, a plan began to form, a daring strategy to bring the truth to the forefront of public consciousness. Evelyn proposed a comprehensive public expose, one that would leave no stone unturned. Malik, with his deep connection to the community and his eloquent ability to convey the raw emotion of their plight, was to be the voice of the people. Their plan was simple yet revolutionary: to harness the power of the media, the strength of public outrage, and the indomitable spirit of a community that refused to be silenced. They knew that by unraveling the web of deceit and broadcasting their findings to the world, they could force a reckoning, one that would hold the corrupt accountable and restore the dignity of the dispossessed. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Evelyn and Malik worked tirelessly, driven by a shared belief that truth was the most potent weapon against corruption. The investigation reached a fever pitch, and every day brought new insights and further evidence that fortified their case. The network of deceit was vast, but so was the collective will of those determined to see justice prevail. In the quiet moments before dawn, as the city lay shrouded in darkness, Evelyn would revisit the evidence, each document a testament to the lives ruined by greed and indifference. And in those moments, she found strength in the knowledge that the truth, however deeply buried, would eventually rise to the surface. In the end, the process of unraveling the web of deceit was as much a journey into the heart of New York City as it was an exploration of the human spirit. It was a journey marked by heartbreak and courage, by the relentless pursuit of justice in the face of overwhelming odds. Evelyn Carter and Malik Johnson, united by a common purpose, had not only exposed a monstrous conspiracy, but had also ignited a spark that promised to illuminate the darkest corners of a corrupt system. Their battle was far from over, but with each piece of evidence uncovered and every secret brought into the light, they edged closer to a future where truth and compassion would triumph over deception and exploitation. Justice, renewal, and the power of hope arrived as a crescendo to a long and arduous struggle, a moment when the weight of injustice was finally lifted, replaced by a collective aspiration for a brighter future. In the cold light of a winter morning, New York City bore witness to a profound transformation. The arrest of key figures in the conspiracy sent shockwaves through the corridors of power, shattering the illusion of invincibility that had long shielded those who profited from the exploitation of vulnerable communities. Harrison Langford, once the polished symbol of corporate ambition, was now a broken figure, his empire crumbling under the relentless scrutiny of a people determined to reclaim their dignity. In a grand press conference held at City Hall, Evelyn Carter stood before a sea of reporters and citizens, her voice steady and resolute as she recounted the journey from betrayal to vindication. She spoke not only of the downfall of corrupt forces, but also of the renewal that had begun to blossom from the ashes of despair. Her words, imbued with both sorrow for the past and hope for the future, resonated deeply with those who had suffered under a system that had long ignored their humanity. Across the city, Malik Johnson emerged as the embodiment of this new spirit. No longer merely the brave teenager whose actions had once defied the odds, he had grown into a passionate advocate for change, a living testament to the power of resilience and the unyielding strength of a united community. At community centers, in school auditoriums, and on the bustling streets of Brooklyn and Harlem, Malik spoke with a clarity and conviction that inspired not just admiration, but a call to action. He reminded his listeners that true success was measured not in wealth or status, but in the ability to uplift one another and build a future where every life was valued. In neighborhoods once scarred by the relentless advance of gentrification, a quiet revolution was taking root. Local councils, emboldened by the public outcry, began to restructure policies to ensure that redevelopment projects would be held accountable to the people they affected. The very blueprint of urban renewal was being redrawn, not as a tool for profit but as a framework for inclusivity and shared prosperity. Community-driven initiatives sprang up, offering affordable housing, educational programs, and support for small businesses that had long been the heartbeat of these historic areas. Amid these sweeping changes, Evelyn channeled her grief and determination into the creation of a foundation dedicated to social justice and community empowerment. The foundation, built on the principles of transparency and compassion, aimed to provide resources and opportunities for those who had been marginalized by decades of systemic neglect. Scholarships were established for bright young minds like Malik's. Community centers were revitalized to serve as hubs for artistic expression and dialogue, and programs were launched to document and celebrate the cultural heritage of neighborhoods that had long been overlooked. This wave of renewal was not without its challenges. The scars of the past were deep, and healing was a slow and arduous process. Yet, in every conversation, every community meeting, and every quiet act of kindness, there was an undeniable sense that something monumental was unfolding, a collective awakening to the truth that justice, once denied, could be reclaimed through solidarity and unwavering resolve. As the days turned into weeks and the bitter winter gradually yielded to the promise of spring, the atmosphere in New York City shifted. The protests, once a desperate cry against injustice, had transformed into a vibrant celebration of community resilience and hope. Public squares and parks became stages for impromptu performances. Murals blossomed on once forgotten walls, and the voices of the people, once muffled by fear, rang out in harmonious defiance against the forces of greed. In the final, defining moments of this transformative period, Evelyn and Malik stood side by side at a community festival held in the historic heart of Harlem. The festival was a living mosaic of music, art, and shared memories, a celebration of the many lives that had been uplifted through their struggle. Families, once on the brink of displacement, gathered to honor their heritage, while young activists looked to the future with eyes filled with hope. In that moment, the power of justice was tangible, a force that transcended the individual and became a collective promise to never again allow corruption and cruelty to dictate the fate of a people. Every note of music, every brushstroke on a mural, and every heartfelt testimony was a reminder that hope, even when battered by the harsh winds of injustice, could be nurtured into something beautiful and enduring. For Evelyn, the journey had been both a personal reckoning and a public mission, a transformation of pain into purpose, and of betrayal into the bedrock of a renewed civic spirit. For Malik, it was the realization that his voice, once small and nearly drowned out by the clamor of oppression, had become a clarion call for change, resonating far beyond the boundaries of his neighborhood. Together, they had shown that even the most deeply entrenched systems of exploitation could be dismantled by the sheer force of human compassion and collective action. As the city looked forward to a future reimagined, a future where every individual, regardless of their background, could stand with dignity and hope, a new chapter was being written. It was a chapter defined not by the tragedies of the past, but by the promise of renewal and the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to dream of a better world. In the radiant glow of that emerging future, justice was not merely a destination, but an ongoing journey, a journey that would continue to inspire and empower every heart that believed in the transformative power of hope. In reflecting on the journey that unfolded before our eyes, we witness a narrative of transformation and courage. A saga that began with the unexpected intervention of fate on a crisp New York morning and culminated in a powerful triumph of justice and renewal. The story centers on Evelyn Carter, a woman who embodied both vulnerability and hope as she stepped out into the world, pregnant with her first child and carrying dreams of a better future. On that fateful day, as the city bathed in the early light of dawn, a tragic accident threatened to shatter her world. In a moment that defied the ordinary, a young hero emerged. Malik Johnson, a 13-year-old whose brave act of selflessness saved Evelyn from imminent peril. Malik's instinctive courage, performed in the blink of an eye, not only spared a life, but also set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately expose the dark undercurrents of exploitation and corruption hidden beneath the facade of progress. In the hours and days that followed, gratitude blossomed into a profound bond between these two unlikely allies. Over shared meals and whispered confidences, Evelyn and Malik discovered a mutual understanding of pain and injustice that transcended their disparate worlds. Evelyn, coming from a life of privilege, was forced to confront the harsh realities faced by those living in marginalized communities, while Malik, burdened by the weight of systemic prejudice and economic hardship in his Brooklyn neighborhood, found in Evelyn a compassionate ear and an ally with the means to effect change. Their alliance was not born out of mere circumstance, but rather out of a shared determination to challenge a redevelopment project orchestrated by Evelyn's own husband, Harrison Langford, a project that threatened to displace entire communities in the name of urban renewal and profit. As Evelyn delved into the sinister layers of corporate manipulation, she uncovered a labyrinthine network of deceit. Harrison's vision of progress, once cloaked in promises of modernity and economic growth, was revealed to be a calculated strategy that exploited vulnerable populations. Behind every contract and every whispered negotiation lay a stark disregard for human dignity, a stark reminder that greed often thrives on the suffering of those without a voice. The evidence gathered by Evelyn, coupled with the heartfelt testimonies Malik collected from his neighbors, formed a damning indictment of a system built on exploitation. Their relentless pursuit of the truth led them to expose not just a single corrupt project, but an entire ecosystem of power that sought to silence dissent and marginalize the underprivileged. In the face of this overwhelming injustice, the duo mobilized a community united by its shared pain and its steadfast resolve to reclaim its heritage. They organized protests, town hall meetings, and grassroots campaigns that resonated with people from all walks of life. As the movement grew, so did its impact. The collective outcry against the redevelopment project forced city officials to re-examine policies that had long prioritized profit over people. Slowly, the tide began to turn as the voices of the dispossessed could no longer be ignored. Neighborhood councils were empowered, and plans were set in motion to protect the cultural and historical identity of communities that had endured decades of neglect. Amid the turbulence, Evelyn and Malik's alliance evolved into a beacon of hope, a testament to the idea that even in the darkest of times, compassion and unity can spark change. At the heart of this struggle was the unyielding belief that justice, while often elusive, is worth fighting for. Evelyn's transformation from a passive bystander to an activist fueled by both love and righteous anger, and Malik's evolution from a courageous rescuer to a symbol of community empowerment, embodied the spirit of resistance that can emerge from the unlikeliest of circumstances. Their story is a powerful reminder that the human spirit, when ignited by empathy and courage, can overcome even the most entrenched systems of corruption. It teaches us that every act of kindness and every moment of bravery has the potential to create ripples of change that extend far beyond the individual and into the fabric of society. From this tale, we learn that adversity often unveils our true character. When confronted with the stark realities of injustice, it is not enough to simply feel gratitude for the good that comes our way. We must also be willing to stand up against the forces that seek to undermine the dignity of others. The story of Evelyn and Malik challenges us to examine our own lives and the systems in which we operate. It calls on us to be vigilant, to question the status quo, and to take action when we see that progress is being built on the suffering of the marginalized. Their journey shows that transformation is possible when we bridge the gap between privilege and struggle, when we allow empathy to guide our actions, and when we unite to dismantle structures of power that thrive on inequality. In applying these lessons to our own lives, we are reminded that change begins with each of us. We must be willing to listen to the voices of those who are often silenced, to learn from their experiences, and to advocate for a more equitable world. Whether it is by supporting community initiatives, engaging in thoughtful dialogue, or holding institutions accountable, every effort counts. The courage demonstrated by Malik and the steadfast determination of Evelyn serve as a clarion call for us all to reject complacency, to fight for justice, and to nurture hope in every corner of our lives. Their story is a testament to the transformative power of solidarity, a reminder that when we come together, no force of corruption can stand against the collective will of a united community. As we conclude this narrative, Let us carry forward the enduring lessons it offers. Let us be inspired by the bravery of a young boy who risked everything for the sake of a stranger, and by a woman who turned her gratitude into a movement for change. May their journey remind us that while the path to justice may be fraught with obstacles, it is also illuminated by the resilient light of hope. In our own lives, let us strive to be agents of transformation, building bridges across divides, standing up for those who cannot stand for themselves, and believing in the possibility of a future where every person is valued and every community thrives. If you found this story as inspiring and thought-provoking as we did, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue sharing stories that not only entertain, but also challenge us to be better, to do more, and to work together for a just and compassionate world. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to bringing you more stories that ignite the spark of change in our hearts and communities.